Hey, everybody. You notice that deep breath because there's something miraculous that happens when you open up the space for people who don't know each other to have a conversation. I didn't think it was going to take off like this. I didn't realize that it would be as this attractive. And in all honesty, I've tried a couple other times with into saying that I'm here available to have conversations. If anybody wants to have a conversation, I got crickets. Nobody responded. There was no interest. When I came up with this idea of 50 conversations with 50 strangers, I got inundated with requests. There's something magnetic, just as for anybody who's in business now, there's something magnetic in the way we frame our offer, right? That if we say it in the right way, people will respond. It's the same in our personal lives. It's our words are very valuable. And what I found in general is we speak a lot, but we listen a little. And what I really wanted to just do in this show is hold the space for people that I don't know. Friends of mine, it's funny, friends of mine have started calling me up and say, I know you, but can I still have the conversation with you? And I said, I guess we could. Why not? We don't have to, I haven't seen you in a long time. We're sort of strangers. So, but it's so interesting to see how the parameters of what's going on, because I think we all want to just have a real conversation with people. And when someone says to you, how are you doing at a dinner party? And you start to go into your answer, they turn away and walk to the next guest. This space is when I ask you how you're doing, I really want to know. So that's the show. We have the beautiful opportunity of this beautiful person sitting in front of us by the name of Hannah Keefer. I know nothing. How are you? She's waving to us. I know not one thing about you. So I can't introduce you. My apologies for if that seems rude. But I didn't want to know anything about you because I wanted to meet you for the first time, like the people coming into the room are. And so, Hannah Keefer, first of all, welcome to the show. And
Thank
would
you.
you? You're so welcome. Thank you for coming. What an honor it is to have you here with us. And would you please be kind enough to tell us who you are and what's important to you?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question, um, but I think a lot of the interests and the passions that I have often coalesce around storytelling of some form. So I love movies, I love storytelling music, I love theater, I love books, I love television. I work in arts education, specifically theater, and teach theater to young people. Um, I the my own podcast is a storytelling based one, and so basically I'm very passionate about stories and storytelling, and that as a way of both expressing ourselves um, and learning about other people's experiences. So this kind of conversation, learning what people are like, for me, most often that medium is done through storytelling, which is something that I just absolutely love to connect to in virtually anywhere there's a story, I'm there.
I love it. And as you can see, there's a looming over my left shoulder, I've been told. There it is a book that I wrote called The Mosaic, which is a fable. It's a story. It's a story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asks the adults where his parents are, they tell him they're in a place called heaven. So he sets out in search of that place called heaven. And the people he meets are not the people he thinks he's going to meet. He thinks he's going to meet the rabbis and the ministers and the priests and the swamis and the gurus and the medicine men and the aborigines elders and blah, 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 blah. But the people that he meets are the trash man and the homeless guy. They're the blind woman and the juice maker. They're the gardener and the waitress. They're just common, ordinary people. And he wonders, why am I sitting here? Why am I meeting these people? What can they show me about heaven? But he says, I'm here. Why don't I just listen to them tell me their story? And in listening to them tell their story in every single case, 100% of the time, he realizes the person he initially saw is not at all the person he's sitting with now. And so when that happens to him over and over and over and over again, he starts to wonder, do I see anything the way it is? Or do I see everything the way I am? And at that moment, he meets a monk who unzips the sky and walks him through to a parallel reality where he meets the wise one who's the keeper of the Mosaic. So I'll pause there because I don't want to labor you with the story, but it's enough of a trailer that if you're
For
interested,
sure.
I'd love people to get the book, read the story, because there's so much in a story that a story, when it leaves our lips, no longer is our story because the person hearing it adapts it into their story. And somewhere in between, where it comes from my lips to someone else's ears, it transforms into our story or into their story. Talk to me about storytelling and how you got into it.
Oh gosh, I've been doing it since I could remember. I was an early reader. I was an early. I would write plays and make my siblings perform them, and so from the first I can remember, I've always been interested in movies and books, especially were the early ones. And then as I got older, I really got into theater, and I like how each different medium. Um, has different brings different things to the storytelling form. So you have books which are more, you can take your time with them, you can sit with them as long as you want.
Yeah.
You have things like film and TV where they're more active, they're bringing you along with them. You have television as opposed to movies where it is these long form stories, so you get time to really develop long narratives, which is really cool. And then you have something like theater, which is live and right in front of you, and stories being brought to life as you go. And even once you get into stuff like improv, narrative improv, it gets even crazier because it's actually making up stories as you go rather than reading somebody else's pre-written pre-written stuff. And so I love how each one of them, and I've dabbled in all of them. I watch all of them and read all of them, and I've played around with creating various ones, and I've written, and I've done a lot of theater and done a lot of acting, a lot of directing, and backstage work, and all of that. And I love how there are so many different angles from which to come at your stories, depending on what kind of story you want to tell and what pieces you want people to take away from it will determine often what the best medium is for that. And so I'm also really interested in like adaptations, like turning something from one thing into another and what needs to change for it to make sense within that medium. You can't just film a stage play and that's a movie. It's a different thing. And so really the adaptations that tend to be really successful are the ones that acknowledge the story that is at the core of the original, but then figure out what part of this storytelling medium is going to shine through in this. How can we make this work? And I'm really fascinated by that. And I love a lot of the theater work that I've done in school has often been adapting books. The
Yeah.
students will be reading a book in their English class, and we're like, okay, we're going to do a 5-minute play version of this. How does this look? Which pieces of this make the most sense on the stage? Which pieces of this really don't? And that's really fun to help students kind of figure out and to continue to figure out for myself as well.
I feel like I'm in a deja vu moment because, and this is the glory of this room. This is the glory of being open to a conversation with a stranger. I literally was just having this conversation because I was talking to someone about creating a film out of the book, The Mosaic,
Yeah.
right? And he's a screenwriter, he's an actor, he's worked with some of the top names he's created some top movies. And we were having the same discussion because when the book itself doesn't have really an antagonist, because the purpose of it wasn't is the antagonist is his own thought process, and it's also own self-defeating. And he said, you know, for it to become a movie, there wasn't one sword fight, there wasn't one gunfight, there wasn't one chase scene, and so in the avenue of movie, I think we would have to bring somebody in. And I said, well, it would be easy to bring in an antagonist. We just bring in another, right? And he said, yeah, but just some people aren't open to that. So, but it was so interesting to hear you just say it because it was a conversation I had almost about the same time yesterday.
It
And
just comes
so,
back.
right, it just comes back, which is really beautiful. What makes you happy?
Oh gosh. definitely, I mean, not to be boring about it, but stories definitely do. There, I love when I love getting to connect with people on a deep level where I do feel like I understand them. Um, and sometimes that happens in person, and sometimes that happens through an artistic medium. Um, I absolutely I love teaching. I love teaching so much. That is like the ultimate soul filler for me, I think. Um, I mean, there are a lot of little pieces that make me happy, but I think they all do connect with. They all come around to understanding somebody's experience deeper. So whether that's having a long, deep conversation with a friend, or arguing about debating about different perspectives with a family member until we finally can figure out what the other is saying, even if we don't agree, or if that's watching a movie from somebody's perspective who I'd never thought of. Anything that makes me feel like I've truly understood somebody else's experience a little bit deeper is I think at the root of most things that bring me happiness.
Psychological question, it sounds like, but it really doesn't meant to be. Um, my mission is about creating a platform for people to be heard. And so when I was on a podcast, someone asked me, "Did you feel heard as a kid?" And I had to say, my parents passed away early. So I didn't really feel heard. I didn't feel like my friends really, as much as they tried, they loved me. Their parents loved me. They tried to understand me. They tried to give me, I mean, they loved and adored me, but they didn't understand what it was like to be a kid without a parent because they didn't have it. They weren't kids without parents. And so I didn't really feel heard. It made me realize that a lot of the things we do come from the fact that we didn't have that when we were growing up. Did people listen to your story when you were growing up?
I think there are aspects of most of my life that somebody would listen to. It was difficult to find one person who would listen to and understand all pieces of who I am. Um, but and things were especially I didn't have a lot of friends in my middle school and high school years. Teenagerdom was not fun. Um, but I did have a very loving and supportive family who I felt did listen to me. It was just, I think, a matter of figuring out what I wanted to say at that point. Like I don't, and that was also when I started really I started getting into a lot of journaling. And so even if I didn't have somebody listening to me, I knew that I felt like I was listening to myself, which was helpful.
Yeah.
Um, as I got older, there were definitely, I definitely found people who outside my family who were listeners and supporters and really strove to understand me. But they definitely, I think all of us experienced this to some degree or another. There were definitely a lot of times in especially high school years where I was just like, nobody is listening to me,
Yeah.
nobody knows who I
Yeah.
am. I don't know what to do about that. And I think I'm sure that's what partly really interests me about working with. I work primarily with middle school, which is such a,
Yeah.
kids are figuring out who they are. They're definitely
Yeah.
figuring out where they fit into society. And so finding a space to be able to give them the tools that maybe I didn't have at the time or wasn't sure how to use, trying to give them the tools to be able um, to find a possibly theater as a possible voice.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's that you don't have words to express something, but this character that you're playing does. Sometimes it's that it's not safe to express an emotion, but hey, this character is really angry.
Right. If I
You
put the
can take that
mask
out
on
there.
of this character, I can do it. Right. And
Exactly. And that's sometimes it's not about like sometimes that is going to be enough of an expression for them to be able and being heard for them to be able to move forward and continue to grow. And so that's something that I think I got from my family in my teen years, but not a lot from my peers. And so
yeah,
that's something that I continue to want to give back
beautiful.
in that sense.
Yeah, I think you're not alone. And I think at those junior high school years are the years where everybody's trying to find out how they fit in and don't fit in. And I don't think many people walk away feeling like they fit in, even the ones that everybody thinks fits in. And right,
Absolutely.
they don't really feel like they fit in. Let's go to a lightning round because I think it'll bring us to some questions that I want to ask you
Sure.
around other stuff. Okay.
Let's do it.
Are you a dog person or a cat person?
I am not an animal person.
Okay, neither. Okay, I like that. All right. Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee.
Okay. Would you say you're a person that lives in the box or out of the box?
Not so lightning, my answer there.
That's okay.
I think I live like right in between. I think I tend to I like to plan things out for myself a lot of the times, but maybe it's that I think out out of the box and then live like right at the edge of inside.
Wow.
I like having boundaries for myself and structure and routine for myself. I deal a lot with anxiety, and so having routines and having being able to plan ahead for what I can is very useful for helping to control that. Um, but I think I do think I think out, think larger and bigger, and doesn't always doesn't always it doesn't always look the way I think people expect.
Yeah. Do you think it challenges your anxiety to think outside of the box?
I challenges it.
In other words,
Yeah,
I think you're so beautifully clear because having anxiety would be so understandable for why you would want the borders of the box, right? And
yeah.
there's comfort in those borders because you know you know when you bump against them, you're bumping against them.
I think I know how to answer that. Okay, so I think thinking outside the box allows me to expand the box.
I love that.
So I think once I can think and like process, if I'm going into a situation that is giving me anxiety because it's new, it's different, I don't know what to expect, it is helpful for me to walk through all the different possibilities of how things could go, including absolutely outlandish, ridiculous ones. You know, everybody's going to throw rotten fruit at you when you walk in the room, stuff
Right.
that's never going to
Right.
happen. But walk through all the outside possibilities, because then it feels like the box expands to accommodate those, and then it doesn't feel so unknown. And so being in the box is not necessarily even a bad thing for me, in the sense it just means that it's within the realm of my comfortable being able to process it and being able
Yeah.
to and feeling comfortable and capable to go forward with it. And so yeah, so I think that's why I was stuck on that question, is because I was
I
like, well, I
love it.
guess I live within it, but I think without it, and I don't know what that means. But I think that's what it is that thinking outside it does actually expand the box for me, in a way that I can continue living, feeling confident what I'm doing, and without, yeah, I think that's where I would land on that.
Uh, uh, and what a beautiful answer, and one that I haven't heard before. And what a
I hadn't either.
beautiful,
I was like, why does
right?
this not make sense to me?
Right. But what a beautiful way to explain a situation and understand it in the course of this conversation. That when given the opportunity to really say what we believe, look what comes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like I'm not surprised that I've never heard it before, but for you to say I've never expressed it that way before really means that you felt listened to enough to be able to figure it out with me, and I so honor you for that because I think
Thank
what a beautiful answer it is. When people ask me that question, I say I live between the space. I live in the space between the box and outside of the box.
you go.
Right, which is really interesting too. Um, I know both of these are important, but I want to ask you not right now in this room, but just right now in this time frame for you. Which of these is more important? Is it more important for you to have a platform on which you can be heard and speak your voice? Or is it more important for you to create a platform for other people to be heard and speak their voice and you listen?
I think these days I'm more in the create a platform for others space. I like you're right, like you said, they're both important. I tend to go back and forth between the
Yeah,
two. I think these days I'm in a platform creation space.
fabulous. What changed from those days to these days?
Um, I think partly it's that, when I first started really, when I first started really exploring what I wanted to say, I felt like I had so much to say and so many ideas and so many thoughts that had been percolating for a long time. And now, those, I've settled into some stuff. Those new ideas come more slowly,
I
which is
got you.
okay. That's good. It's they're sitting for a long time. There's not a buildup anymore. And And partly also it's that I'm also extremely introverted, and it's often easier for me to create that space for other people because in a sense it's less work for me. It's good
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
but there's when if I find it if I'm constantly the one sharing my voice and constantly the one being the one in there's a pressure in there to be the one saying the right thing, to be saying the smart or the funny or the insightful thing, and sometimes that's awesome and that's what you need and that's what you want, and sometimes there are times where I'm just like I just need to sit back, and I think for me right now, during, as you know, pandemic is happening, quarantine is happening, and everything's shut down, that's there. It's been a time where I've wanted to just kind of sit and let, where I don't feel a need to share as much. That
Yeah.
most of my sharing is either is sporadic or is in the interest of bringing other folks in.
It's so interesting because I created this whole platform for people to have a voice and to speak their voice. And the large majority of the people that I ask that question to say they feel like it's more important for them right now to set a platform for other people. So the whole experiment.
And I think I'm being genuine there. I don't think
No,
I'm just saying that because I'm supposed to. But
no, I think but it goes with a lot of what other people are saying, and so it's sort of so interesting to have an experiment where you realize the premise of your experiment may not be what people are even wanting to have right now. They just want to create those spaces, and so I want to invite people, if you feel that way, to do this something in your own way, somehow, where you reach out to people and give them the place to have their voice. And if their voice is to hear other people's voices, invite them to reach out and do the same thing, right?
yeah,
Because
exactly.
there could be nothing better than if we started a revolution of listening right now
Hmm.
in a world that doesn't listen too much to each other.
No,
My
absolutely.
my point. What doesn't mean it's your point. Okay,
No, I think it's absolutely on. It's on. It's
right.
there.
Thank you. Um, do you feel like you fit into the world, or that you're different?
I think that I've found my spaces, but I don't think that I fit into the world in as a whole.
Okay, got it.
But I've found spaces where I fit, but not everywhere.
Why do you think there's such a need for us to fit into the world?
I think I think it comes from wanting to know that you're not alone, wanting to connect with other people. And so one of the things I think the way we do that is by finding commonalities. And so sometimes we think that the more we have in common with someone, the more connected we are, and that's not always true. Um, but I think that's where a lot of it is. I think it's partly that. I think it's also about us looking to others for guidance on how to be. I think all of us, I think more of us than admit it, feel a little lost sometimes about how we're going about the world and whether we're
Yeah,
doing the things we should be doing or being the people we should be. And so we look to the people around us that we admire, and so there's a little bit of that as well. So I think it's both looking for connection and commonality and being like, I'm not the only one dealing with this, but also wanting to imitate and be like the people who we see and admire for whatever reason that might be. And if you don't fit in, that can first of all make you feel very isolated, very much like I
yeah,
am the only one who feels like this, which is
yeah,
almost never true. And as well as making you feel like maybe I'm the one doing it wrong, everybody else has got it right and I'm the one who's messed it up.
yeah. I find you so insightful, and I just had a thought that I haven't had before in any of these conversations, and I just wanted to share it with you because
Yeah.
it's almost like our desire to fit into a world has caused us to criticize and put down people for not being like us, so that we could fit into a world that does that. And it almost is like we're beating ourselves up so that we can fit into something we don't even want to have, because it's going to come back to us also. Does that make any sense to you? I mean,
Yeah, I think we definitely there's definitely if we're not sure what we're supposed to be or who we're supposed to be and we're looking to other people for it, and then we see people who are seemingly not working as hard as we are to be this person and being happy doing something else. There's a
Yeah.
bit of that threatens our own path and being like, what, how come they don't have to put all this work into it and they can just be happy and do their own thing? Well, they must be doing it wrong because it goes against my path. And so I think that can come down to, that we think that there's like one right way to be happy or one right way to be who we need to be, and so anything that is not ours seems threatening because maybe it's a sign that we're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Do you feel like you live more in your head or more in your heart?
I would say like 75 to 80% in my head.
Do you feel like you're a leader or a follower?
That one really changes. I would say in general follower, but in a classroom, that I have found like my one leadership role.
Hmm.
It's in a classroom, but in my day-to-day life, very much a follower.
Well, and do you think people are more similar than they are different, or more different than they are similar?
Oh, I absolutely think more similar. Like there's um, uh, I dog's making noise at me. um, I think people have a lot more similarities, especially once you get down into the stuff that people don't talk about. But
Yeah.
like I think we all share very not all, but the time when I realized that most people were as insecure about themselves as I was about myself
Yeah.
was eye-opening. And I was like, wait a minute. And so I think once you get down into insecurities and fears and deep, deep wishes, I think a lot of those are very, very widespread and very, very common. And even if you don't share the exact same as somebody else, you absolutely share that with a lot of other people.
Yeah. So almost when you get past the superficial, is this what you're saying? That when you get past the superficiality of what color skin, where we were brought up, what religion we practice, how much money we make or don't make, and you get to the things that are really inside people, that inside we go through the same foibles, the same joys, the same pleasures. Is that sort of what you're saying?
I think so. I think the further down you get, the fewer variations there are, I
Love it.
suppose.
Love it.
And they all express themselves differently, which is great and fantastic and allows for variety. So we're not all the same person. We have some interesting diversity and we're different people, and that's cool. But I think the further down you get in who people are, I think you end up with smaller and smaller collections of pieces of them.
I love that. I really love that. Do you believe that you spoke about creating a platform where you could listen? Do you believe the things in the world are speaking to us? Do you believe the climate is speaking to us? Do you believe the world is speaking to us? Do you believe our jobs speak to us? Do you believe our environment speaks to us? Um, or do you just believe people speak to us?
Um, I think I would primarily say people. I do, I do believe in a God, so I do believe that God speaks to people in some way. I don't know what form that might take, but that might come through environmental reasons, or might come through non human objects, or might be in a sense. But I think in my personal experience, it's been primarily people and God and myself.
So when we go through an experience like a Me Too movement that shakes us at our foundation of how men and women interact with each other, and then we go through a global pandemic like like coronavirus, and then we go through race protests. You do you not think that the world around us is trying to say something to us?
I think it's the world through people.
Through
I
people.
think it's that the people all together um, are that is an expression coming out of us. And I don't know. There very well could be um, other avenues or other things to listen to. I think in my experience, I think things like that, you look at, you look at a lot of these, and they are I don't know where I was going with that. I started off as if that was going to be a smart sentence, and it wasn't, so I just stopped. Um, but I do think that they are that who we need to listen to at the heart of that is going to be people, and that's going to be the people who are dealing with the repercussions of this, and that whether people are actively speaking out about this, or whether the world and the environment around us is reacting to the voice, to what's inside them that may be expressing itself elsewhere.
Right.
I think the core of it is still coming from people.
Interesting. Do you believe our bodies speak to us?
I think as an extension of us, I wouldn't separate that from I wouldn't say my body versus myself. I would say that I'm speaking to myself through my body, or that somebody else is speaking to me through their body. I don't think I differentiate the two.
Wow. I love
My
having
my
conversation.
body is me.
Right.
I'm not.
But
It's all part of me.
and I love that. Can I push you a little bit? Because I would love
Yeah,
to know
go
how
for it.
you feel. When we have pains in our body, do you think our body is trying to say something to the me that we are that we're not listening to?
I think I think it's not two people. I think I
Okay.
think I think the body. I think I could comfortably say the body part of me is trying to speak to the conscious part of me, perhaps, or
Okay.
the unconscious versus the conscious. But to me, there's not. It's not like there's two situations. It's not me versus my body. It's that it's all one entity, and that sometimes there may be pieces of myself, and that includes my body, that may be that may be in need and may be unheard. And and I think partly that is because, like, I deal with chronic illness,
Yeah.
and so it's been very important for me to not see it as me versus my body, like they're
Right.
in competition with each other, or they're fighting each other, and so that is entirely as a whole me.
But okay, so I love that, and I love your honesty. Let me just keep going, if you don't
Go
mind,
for
and lob it back to me or slam it back to me.
it.
I'm because this is so interesting to me. I have a developmentally delayed daughter. I'm going to try and cut to the chase really quickly. She can't speak like you and I speak. So when she speaks and she doesn't get heard, she yells. When she yells and she doesn't get heard, she tantrums. And when she tantrums and she doesn't get heard, she attacks. Because she really wants to be heard. She taught me how she speaks. She ended up putting thoughts in my head. And we went through a long process where we had to figure out how she was speaking to me. And when I realized she was putting thoughts in my head and she told me that, we had such a relief, and she never did that again. What it made me see is that we weren't trying to negate that. We just didn't know that existed. And as soon as she felt listened to, she no longer needed to scream or tantrum or attack. I took that into the workplace where I go. I took it into boardrooms. I took it into hospitals. I took it into self-care clinics. I took it into prisons. I took it into homeless shelters. And I said, I wonder if people are just trying to say something, and they're just acting in the way my daughter did. When they don't get heard, they yell. When they don't yell, they tantrum. When they tantrum, they attack.
Mhm.
It might be why somebody blows up a building. It might be why someone shoots at Times Square. It might be why someone tries to end a relationship or ruin the reputation of a person. And that if we would only listen to people and listen to what they were trying to say, they would never need to scream, tantrum, or yell. So for me, it started to become, wow, I looked at the world around me and I said, my body's doing that. My body's been trying to tell me that there's something wrong and I haven't been listening. And so it started to scream at me. And when I still didn't listen, it started to disrupt stuff. It started to create pains in my body that I didn't. And then when I didn't listen to that, it started to destroy parts of my body. Right. And so I watched the simple teaching of a developmentally delayed child change everything about the way I view the world. I took it into businesses. People do the same exact thing. When an employee doesn't get listened to, he yells. When he yells and
Oh
he
yeah,
doesn't,
it's
right?
this is how we react.
It's
Yeah.
how we react. So it made me think, well, I wonder if the world operates the same way. If it's trying to tell us that we're not taking care of it in the way it wants to be taken care of, would it yell? Would it tantrum? And would it
Mhm.
destroy? I tried to look at the way everything in the world operates, and I see exactly that same pattern. So, with that explanation, do you see anything now that you didn't see before, or do you still believe the same way you believe? Which is more than I'm 1,000% fine with you believing exactly how you believe.
I do think I would still I love that explanation. I think that makes total sense. I think that I still think that the core of it is coming out of people, and and part of that is because I'm not sure that I believe in a sentient isn't quite the right word, but in a I certainly don't believe in a world that reacts the same way humans do.
Oh,
We are, and so I think the signs are all there, but I think there are things that we are that are coming out of us. Like I think especially the pandemic possibly is we're looking at that as a coming out of the world, out of nature, but some of the other stuff you brought up, some of the protests, like that's straight, that's us, that's coming out of us, that's the cries of us not being of humans and people not being listened to and people
totally.
not being heard. And so so I think no matter what signs or signals we see, I think for me I still tend to see that as coming out of the cries of people. um Partly because most of the things that I've seen that would be, um, let me just say that's partly because that's been my experience. I mean, the experience of most of the people that I know, and I'm still open, and I'm still,
No, but
we'll see if
I
anything
love
comes
that
up.
experience.
But
So
but yeah,
so whether it's the world or it's the cries of people or it's us or whatever it is, that's almost second nature. Second. What do you think the cries of people are trying to say to us right now?
honestly, I think a big thing right now is the cry just being of taking care of stuff that doesn't affect you personally, like whether that's looking at taking care of our environment even if it has no bearing on how we're living right now today. Like if I decide to start living a more environmentally friendly lifestyle, that's not going to have an immediate benefit to me.
Yeah,
Whether you look at how people are treating each other in during the pandemic or during any of the protests, I think a lot of it is a cry of to not only listen to but be willing to act on behalf of people, even when it is not on behalf of people that aren't just you. Like
love
even
it.
if it is not about you,
Yeah,
that it is worth acting on behalf of and fighting for and assisting other people's experience. And I think that's kind of the undercurrent running through a lot of stuff that's going on right now, and I think that's the battle that's being fought in a lot of arenas right now.
I love that. Do you think the cries of the people are trying to say something to you personally?
I think I don't know that I think that most people are. Okay, I'll say this. I don't think people are trying to reach me personally because most people don't know me. I think there are things that I can take out of it that I need to learn and move forward with.
That's my question.
And yeah, and so I think I don't know that I have a clear answer for that at this point. I think it's something I'm listening and trying to figure out where can my place be in this. Whether it's to continue to work with the students of the country and the state I'm in, and give them voices so that they can continue on this good work, and be and be hopefully listening to the cries of the other people around them, or whether there's something else that I'm meant to do at this time, or whether there's something that I need to adjust. And so I think I'm in the listening stage at that point, at trying to think through what is the most essential thing for me to be taking away, or pieces. It doesn't have to be one. What are the pieces of this that I need to take away from it? And there are absolutely, things that I've adjusted in my life in terms of broadening who I'm listening to and who I'm talking with, and being willing to engage in conversations that may be uncomfortable or difficult. And um, and so I think there are little things, and I don't know that I have a large answer yet. It's still just, there's a lot of voices and a lot to untangle and figure out what is the best and most compassionate and wisest way for me to move forward with stuff, is where I'm searching.
Love it. Amidst all those voices, if you had 1 minute to share with people who want to know what those voices are saying to them, what would you say?
I think, and this comes around to what we started with. I think that listening to other people's stories is so important, and listening to understand, and to as much to put yourself in their shoes and think, what would that be like? And whether that's having a conversation with somebody who feels very differently than you do about something, and figuring out what are the thought processes running through this, what is we talk about going deep down. The further down you get, the fewer differences there are. What is the core difference down there that is expressing itself in this way? The more I grew up in a very homogenous area of the country, and there were not a lot of people around who were not like me, who we all had very similar growing up experiences. So for me, art was the way out. Art was the way for me to learn what it could be like to live in somebody else's shoes, or to deal with this, or to deal with that pressure, or to have to go through this at a young age, or to be constantly attacked from this angle. And the more that you can put yourself into a position where you are hearing and listening to other people's stories, whether fictionalized or real, um, will expand your ability to understand what people are going through in the real world. And that's so important. Um, and and art is a wonderfully, I don't want to say safe, because but it's a way to do it in which you're not going to, if you watch a movie from somebody else's perspective, you're not going to have to worry about saying the wrong thing. You're not going to have to worry about saying something dumb and making yourself look stupid. You're not going to, you can watch and just learn and absorb.
Yeah.
And that is, especially for a lot of people who are trying to figure out how to have difficult conversations with people around them. I always will highly recommend, if you're not sure where to start, this is a good place to kind of get some understanding of maybe what some folks are dealing with, what some folks are going through, and maybe that'll give you a little more context. That's how I learned a lot of stuff, and it equipped me
Yeah.
to be able to go out and have those conversations in the real world as well.
Hannah, if people want to find out more about you, or get in touch with you, or do work with you, or do any of those things, how would they go about doing that?
Probably the easiest way right now is to get a hold of me through, actually through my podcast. I do a quick short storytelling podcast where we take a randomly generated plot synopsis and try to flesh it out into what could be a real story somewhere. And so if you want to get a hold of me, that's probably the easiest way. And so my Twitter for that is, the name of the podcast is Somebody Write This. And so our email account is just somebodywritethis@gmail.com. And we have a Twitter, and that's Write This Pod. And
Okay, perfect.
so yeah, that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
And will you send me all those things, all those links,
For sure.
and also send me a cover shot of a headshot of your, so that I can put it on and make a cover of us.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your point of view. I love conversations like this because I think there were at least two times where you said points of view that were completely different than anything that I've ever heard before. And I love that because
Yeah, absolutely.
it shows another way of looking at the same thing that I always looked at. And I always say that I think everything in the world is possible. The thing that makes it impossible is I don't see a way to make it possible.
There you
So
go.
when I start to see different ways of looking at the same thing, it opens up doorways to possibilities that something that I thought was impossible now becomes possible. For those of you listening at home, if you like this, I please share it with your friends. Please tell them about these conversations. If someone you know or you yourself wants to have a conversation, just get in touch with me. I love the idea of having conversations with strangers. I don't know if it's still the rebellious little boy that wants to say to his mom, "Mom, you told me don't talk to strangers, and look, it's okay. But I think it's more than that. I don't think I'm rebelling against my mom. I think there's something beautiful when we can spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour with someone we didn't know before, someone who was a stranger, and get to know them a little bit and walk away as feeling like they could be a friend or they already are a friend. Stranger things have happened than strangers talking to strangers or listening to strangers and becoming friends. I invite you to do the same thing. If you're a person who wants to set up a platform for people to speak, set up the platform. It's easy. If you're a person that wants to convey a message, get out in front of people and start speaking. Do you have one last thing you want to say before we go? Anything?
No, I think that covered a whole bunch.
I do too. Okay. Again, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you guys for listening. Um, until next stranger comes into this room, don't be too strange, okay? Strangers become friends, and they're no longer strangers. Don't be a stranger. Until next episode, thank you so much. Ciao.